Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the Ottawa School of Art's virtual artist talk and book launch as part of Karen Bailey's latest exhibition entitled The Last Stable in Lowertown, Cundell Stables, Ottawa. My name is Kathy Brake, and I am the gallery coordinator for the Ottawa School of Art ByWard campus located at 35 George Street in the ByWard Market, and I will be your moderator this evening. Before we get into our topic this evening, I would like to take a moment and introduce and thank our wonderful technical support person, Shayla Hanscom, for all her work and expertise in making this event possible. Thank you, Shayla. And now on to our topic. Karen Bailey is an Ottawa-based artist whose diverse artistic career has spanned 4 decades. From heraldic painter to war artist, Bailey is a visual storyteller, with many of her paintings focusing on the under-recognized or behind-the-scenes workers. Themes in past series of her works include church tea ladies, hairstylists, servers, and charity shop volunteers. As an appointed war artist, Karen Bailey traveled to Afghanistan in 2007 to document Canadian military medical personnel and published Triage, an artist in Kandahar. A selection of work from this series was presented at the Ottawa School of Art in 2010 in an exhibition of the same name. In 2012, Karen painted the official portrait of the Right Honorable Michael Jean, the 27th Governor General of Canada. This work was unveiled that same year. Other projects included Raising Stanley, Life with Juliet, a collaborative exhibition and theatrical performance that premiered at the Great Canadian Theatre Company in 2018. In this series of paintings, Karen documented the journey from puppy to working guide dog for the blind. Another series of work entitled Fogo focused on the people and landscape of Fogo Island, Newfoundland, following 2 visits to this remote North Atlantic island. This brings us to Karen Bailey's most recent body of work. In Ottawa's Lowertown neighborhood, the name Cundell is synonymous with horses. When the Cundell family first arrived in Ottawa from Dublin, Ireland in the early 1860s, they brought with them an Irish affinity for horses, a propensity that has been passed down through 5 generations. Today, the sight of Johnny Cundell perched atop a wagon artfully driving his pair of 2,000-pound Belgian draft horses through busy downtown streets with office towers and condominiums looming overhead is an echo of past times. John inherited the family business, the Cundell Stables, located at 113 York Street, from his father, Fred, and has spent a lifetime working dawn to dusk. Together with partner Patty Nugent, he has maintained the stables and harness business, raised a family, and become a legend in the community. Cundell Stables is a living legacy of Lowertown's early days and an extraordinary remnant of Ottawa's past. In her latest series entitled The Last Stable in Lowertown, Karen Bailey portrays the working life of her neighbors, the Cundell family, at the historic Cundell Stables, the last remaining horse stable in Lowertown, Ottawa. And with that, Karen, welcome. And I'll hand the reins, so to speak, over to you.
Thank you, Kathy. It's wonderful to be here, and I really want to thank you for, as gallery director, for hanging the exhibition because it looks magnificent. You've done a fantastic job. And Shayla, for all of your technical work and all of the publicity and media work you've been doing, which is just such a benefit. Thank you to both of you. And one thing I did want to say is I'm so thankful that the Ottawa School of Art were the ones that I guess invited me to have the exhibition. I was successful in my application with the Ottawa School of Art. I had applied for many places, but it was the Ottawa School of Art that I was really hoping to have an exhibition with, primarily because it's just a few blocks away from John Cundell's Stables. And of course, just another extra block over to where my husband and I live on Clarence Street. And it's an exhibition that really has to be shown and seen in this neighborhood, because Lowertown is the Cundell Stables neighborhood. So thank you to the Ottawa School of Art for that. I guess I should also just point out that back in 1922, William Cundell, he had stables on George Street, literally one block from the building that the Ottawa School of Art is in today. So there's just so many great stories around that. I wanted to thank some of the people who made enormous contributions to this project, because, and I think you won't mind me thanking a few people, because I explain then part of the story around what I'm doing with that. And certainly the Cundell family are the first ones I want to thank. The Cundell family know the true value of community. Johnny Cundell, partner Patty Newton, their daughter Taylor, and stable hand Big John O'Hara have tolerated my continued presence over the last 2 years. And I've been living in their pocket and examining their working lives with a magnifying glass. And they've tolerated it all with good grace and humor. The last stable in Lowertown, Cundell Stables, the book, is in both French and English to accurately reflect Lowertown, both past and present. And John Cundell's mother was Francophone and his father was of Irish descent. He grew up speaking both French and English. La dernière écurie de la Baville, Cundell Stables, le livre est en français et en anglais pour refléter fidèlement la ville, passée et présente. La mère de Johnny Cundell était francophone et son père était d'origine irlandaise. Johnny a grandi en parlant français et anglais. Mark Aubin, my collaborator, he researched and wrote a comprehensive history of the Cundell family, and he sourced all of the historic photographs. His contribution was absolutely invaluable to this collaboration. He's a 5th generation French-Canadian Lowertown resident, and he specializes in Lowertown history. I don't think Mark realized just how much work was going to be involved in this project when he agreed to be part of it. But I think once he got involved, he became equally fascinated with telling the Cundell story. Rachel Ugster is the book's editor, and she was absolutely meticulous in her editing, and she was a pleasure to work with. And Francois Girard was the translator of the book, and he came with high recommendations. But I have to admit that he impressed me immediately when his father had been a lumberjack, and he worked with Lark. So that was, to me, that was just another wonderful story connected with this. Barbara Bailey, my sister, is a Toronto-based book designer, and she worked tirelessly on the design of this book. And you can imagine what an extra challenge it is to create a bilingual publication, because it is like designing 2 books. And the book design is truly impressive. So I hope everybody gets a chance to see that. I can even hold that up now just so people have a rough idea, because this is a book launch. So I'll hold up the book. I have to thank my husband, Ian Main, because he has lived with this creative journey 24/7. And I teased him that he could be my understudy for this talk tonight, but he declined. He said he'd rather it up to me. He needs a bit of a break from the Cundell Stables project, I think. And I want to thank my funders, the City of Ottawa. They gave me a heritage project funding grant and a professional artist grant. Heritage Ottawa awarded this project a Gordon Cullingham grant for research and publication. Ottawa Bilingual Ottawa enabled us to have the work translated and to create a bilingual publication. The Government of Canada and l'Association de Communauté Francophone d'Ottawa as well. And I must thank the Lowertown Community Association for their tremendous support. So I hope everyone can see that all right. that's fine. So continuing on my theme of highlighting the under-recognized through my art, in Cundell Stables, I'm seeking to recognize the contributions made by the Cundell family and their horses over the generations to the City of Ottawa. This talk is from the perspective of an artist, and my focus is on the lived experience of the Cundell family and life at the stables. Some of you will have attended my Heritage Ottawa talk on this exhibition. So there's going to be some overlap, and certainly the story is going to be really familiar to you, but I have included some different works, different images, and the focus is more on my process. So this evening, I'm going to show you some of my past work for context, some of the work that Kathy mentioned that I've done in the past, and I'm going to explain how and why I began this project and describe the stables, give you a very brief potted history of the Cundell family. So I'll be illustrating my process, and I'm going to show you page spreads from the book so that you know, well, this is a book launch after all. We're starting out with an image of York Street, and this is, there's of course, it's all of the historic homes all along the street, and right in the middle is Johnny Cundell and Patty Newton's home, the red, bright red brick house with the white trim. And behind it, you can see an 8-story condominium. I was going to say tower, it's not a tower, but we'll just say it's a low-rise building. And that's where my husband Ian and I live. And you know, when we moved in there in 2018 into that building, and I had no idea that we would be overlooking a horse stables. And it wasn't until soon after moving in, it was in the winter we moved in, and soon after moving in, I could hear the sound of the clip-clop of hooves. And I went out onto the balcony and opened the door, and I could smell manure. And I looked down and I saw 2 enormous horses pulling a coal-black carriage out of the laneway below. And for me, the dichotomy of living in a modern building and looking down upon such an old world activity just, it just astonished me. So watching the daily activity of a stable from the perspective of 5 floors up, to me as an artist, was absolutely mesmerizing. As a visual storyteller, my narratives trigger memories through depictions of familiar scenes and commonplace subjects engaged in everyday rituals, much like what the Cundells are doing every day in maintaining their stables. My focus is on behind the scenes workers and under-recognized people. Themes of service and community inform my work. And for those of you tonight who aren't familiar with my work, I'm going to just show a few examples from past series that I've done. So first of all, we're looking at something from Cut, which was, I focused on the workers in a hair salon. And here is a color technician standing behind her client and lifting the foil to check the color. And I think you can tell by the expression on the client's face, she's really not sure about what's happening with this process. In Blanche Doris, I featured older women preparing food for church functions. And this was inspired because my mother was involved with a church group. And in this painting, Blanche is making cookies, and they're shortbread cookies with little bits of cherries on the top. And this was one of the activities that I was just, I guess, I almost say hooked on for a while, in the same way that I was with the Cundell Stables. I really was fascinated by the whole process that the group of women did behind the scenes in the church. And in the next piece, it's from Triage. As a war artist, I documented the military medical personnel at a hospital in Kandahar, Afghanistan. And in this image, a young Afghan girl is being helped to walk again by a military nurse and an Afghan interpreter. And in the background, you can just see two adult male patients, one in a bed and another one in a wheelchair. And that was more or less the scene when I was in the Royal 3 Hospital in Kandahar. And in this next image, you can see it's from Raising Stanley, Life with Tulia. And this features Stanley, who my husband and I raised as a guide dog for the blind. And this project, Raising Stanley, Life with Tulia, was a collaboration with storyteller Kim Kilpatrick. It was a theatrical production. And the theme was raising and working with a guide dog for the blind. And this triptych is called Hello, Goodbye. And it features a white lab. Well, that's Stanley. Stanley is a puppy in the first panel, a white dog on a red background. The second panel is an adult Stanley facing the viewer. And the third panel is an adult Stanley with his back to the viewer, which was the hello goodbye that we both experience as puppy raisers and as those who use guide dogs for the blind. The next work is from the Tea Room series, which I focused on young women working behind the counter in a busy tea room in Victoria, BC. And here behind the counter, a young woman prepares chocolate with elaborate kitchen equipment as two young women work in the background. My Fogo Island work was inspired by two sojourns to that island in Newfoundland. I painted the people and the landscape of this remote island. And here a fisherman stands on the land and he looks out towards Brimstone Head, which is promontory in the distance. And Brimstone Head is one of the four corners of the earth, according to the Flat Earth Society. And they have their headquarters on Fogo Island. So I thought it was really important to make sure it's a very large painting that features Brimstone Head. We're coming now back to York Street and Cundell Stables. And here's an image of the gates leading into the laneway with the barn in the distance. And this is Cundell Stables with the familiar shingle on the brick wall. Patty likes to say that their place is country in the back and city in the front. And that is so true. I'd like to describe this scene because here's the back, here's the barn. And I think for me at first, everything had seemed very, very romantic because behind a historic brick duplex is this beautifully maintained red and white barn. And inside are two enormous Belgians and 6 miniature horses, 6 black miniature horses, a loyal stable hand named Big John O'Hara. There are racks of harnesses and horse leathers and equipment, both in the barn and in their house, everywhere. There's hay piled high, there's the scent of manure, the clattering of hooves, and the sound of bells when you hear the horses going in and out. They're excited passengers waiting to board a vintage carriage and the wagon. This was the view when we first moved in, looking down from our balcony. You look down and you can see the roof of the barn and what the laneway and the yard. There's John's snow clearing equipment down there. And you can see their Chip and Jake and the wagon looking like they're just about ready to go out. And here's the view in the summertime when John Cundell and his grandson's out playing in the yard. And there's one of the old vintage carriages with the burgundy velvet interior. And you can see the tea party, the back of the tea party on the left, and the back of John Cundell's house on the right, and just a little bit of their barn. So this is this romantic view, but the truth is, I think we all know this is the reality of what has been happening in the last 2 years at the Cundell Stables. And I don't want to make it seem dramatic, but it was dramatic having this happen. Patagonia purchased the house next door, which had formerly been the Tea Party Cafe. Patagonia purchased it, and they put in an application to expand into the yard area in the back. But that yard area in the back had been a shared yard since 1948. Patagonia, of course, had to go to City Hall to get the permission to be able to do this. And they had a very slick lawyer. And of course, there's no question that they won their case. When I first met John and Patty to really speak with them, it was at City Hall, and it was after the hearing regarding this development. So it is a challenge for them to operate the stable. I mean, not only, of course, with this construction going on, but in today's environment down in the ByWard Market with increasing traffic, the construction, the city development. But you can see what it looked like as the construction went ahead next door. And you can see from this exactly the footprint of the extension that Patagonia has put into the yard. They went right to the full extent of the yard. And this is the most recent photograph to show you what the roof looks like, because that's what they're just working on right now. But you can see how, I admit it's impeded our view of the Cundell yard and the Cundell Stables, but we can still see a bit of what's going on. But John Cundell refers to this as the Berlin Wall, and that's what it's like. I think that this story really needed to be told, and I think not because of this construction, but because John Cundell is operating Cundell Stables, and I don't think that any of his children are going to take over. They all have lives of their own, but it really is the last stable in Lowertown. And I think as the construction progressed and the changes downstairs, to me, it became increasingly important that the Cundells be recognized for what they were doing. And I would just want to do my bit as a visual artist and see what I could do to document what was going on. And I think the story did need to be told more fully than I was able to just with my images. And that's why I invited Mark Oban to contribute a history of the family in the context of Lowertown, because that's critical for the story. Certainly working with Mark gave me a better understanding of the relevance of the Cundell family and the Stables to the City of Ottawa. I learned so much about Lowertown history from him. And I know when I collaborated with the storyteller Kim Kilpatrick for the Raising Stanley Life with Tulia, that was on a theatrical project. And these collaborations, I find as an artist to collaborate with other artists in other disciplines, it's enormously rewarding from an artistic point of view, but I think mainly because it provides a huge learning curve, tremendous. Here are John and Patty Cundell sitting on their wagon, bundled up to go for a ride, because you can imagine how cold it is when they sit right there on the top of their wagon outside for an hour at a time. Sometimes they're out for 6 hours at a time in the cold. I think when I visited them in January 2020, that was when I proposed to do this series of paintings documenting the working life at the stables in the exhibition. I did want to have a book at the same time. And I remember when I mentioned this to Patty and Johnny, they said, oh, they were excited because they said they'd always wanted someone to write a family history. Well, I don't think that they necessarily realized what they were getting themselves in for, because I don't think that they were thinking about the painting side of things. They were thinking more about the family history. And what happened was that as a visual artist, of course, I was always having my eye on what was going on at the stables, but I became like the paparazzi and a very nosy, sorry, not noisy, but a nosy neighbor. the two of them tied into one. So as the family history and the book were being put together, I think it was more demanding for me, but it was more demanding for them. As I say, I don't think they quite realized what they were getting themselves into. I want to give you just a brief Cundell family history, just so that you have just the briefest of backgrounds. And I think, of course, it's better if you read Mark Oban's full history. It's wonderful and rich. But William Cundell, he came from Dublin, Ireland in the early 1860s. With his wife, Mary, and three young children, George, Elizabeth, and Thomas. The present-day Cundell descendants are from the oldest son, George, who was born in 1847. And the family probably came as a result of the Great Irish Famine. It was no doubt that the construction of the Parliament buildings also brought William to Ottawa, specifically to Ottawa. He was listed as a laborer in 1864, and the family were living at 185 York Street in the 1870s. George's son, William, who was nicknamed Shorty, was already selling horses by the age of 12, and he later became one of the best-known horse dealers in Eastern Ontario. Johnny Cundell is part of the 5th generation of Cundells to live and work with horses in Lowertown. And here's the inside of the barn. And you can see from this picture that there's Big John O'Hara with a shovel filled with manure, and that's Chip's, the backside of Chip in his stall. And in the foreground, you can see my easel and a canvas and my paints and equipment and a small footstool that I'd be sitting on when I'd be working. And this is an example of me having Big John sit for me, and he's sitting in front of just like a rainfall, a shower of tack, of horse harnesses, of leathers. It's quite remarkable. And in the foreground, you can see is my initial sketch of Big John. And you can see just to the left in this picture is that looks like Rosebud. That's one of the little horses, Rosebuds, and they're so curious all the time, so sticking her nose out. I just wanted to explain that Big John, he has volunteered to help out for 16 years now with Cundell Stables, and he keeps the place spotless. He keeps the horses fed and groomed and exercised. The horses and harnesses are always cleaned meticulously. Patty does a lot of that before going out on a ride, either in the carriage or on the wagon. Patty polishes all of the decorative harnesses, bells, halters, and horse equipment. In the exhibition, you'll see I will include a photograph of this. I've feature a complete horse harness hanging on a harness rack alongside bales of hay. I paint in acrylic, and this is just a sample of some of my tubes of paint or pots, whatever I use. And I do use a limited palette. This is what really all I need, these colors plus white, and that's all I use. I always put a wash of burnt sienna onto the canvas initially. I sketch the composition lightly in charcoal, and using this limited low-key palette. It includes Payne's Gray, Naphthol Red Light, Yellow Ochre, and then of course Titanium White. I make a detailed sketch, a small detailed sketch using photographic reference, and then I square off the work. I sketch in the charcoal onto a squared canvas, and I give the canvas a light spray after that with fixative, just so that the charcoal doesn't mix in with the colors. I'm going to be showing you some of the works here, but not all, and I'll include some of my process. So this is the beginning of a piece I call Best Friends. And this is just a sketch onto the canvas with just a little bit of maybe some white around the figure, but that's Big John leading Jake. And I'm looking at him from above. So you don't see all of Jake's body, but because he goes off the canvas, you really get a sense that he's a large horse. And this was the finished painting. and I wanted to make it in the winter time. So, I mean, there, of course, there wasn't really snow there, but I've made it look like there's snow. And John is wearing his red and black, kind of like a lumberman's jacket. And Jake is a lovely light brown color with a white band on his nose. And in this work, it's called Chip. Sorry, this one is a stable friendship. And in this work, you can see Chip looking quite large on the canvas. In fact, he goes off the canvas. And I remember when I first showed this painting, after I'd finished it, I showed it to John Cundell. And the first thing he said was, well, where are the horse's ears? Because I wanted to show that the horse was so large that it went off the canvas, and it did. You can't see his ears and you can't see his hooves. And that's Big John grooming him to the left. And those little horses, it looks like it's probably, I think it might be Jill and Janelle and Queen there. The little horses poking their heads out of the stalls to look and watch as Chip is being groomed. In this next work, I'm going to show you a series of 4 works to show you how I paint. It's my process. Of course, in this, I've already started sketching things. You'll see there are 4 canvases here, and I guess they're all in different states of progress. One of them is complete, and that's the city horse, the colored one of the buildings, and a horse in the foreground. But the other 3 canvases you can see have that burnt sienna wash over them. And I've sketched on a horse. In the near canvas, you can see a woman leading the horse. That was an unfinished one that I really didn't ever finish. The large piece in the background, that's Chip in harness. And that's a Chip wearing his full horse's harness with Johnny Cundell leading him. You can see the work in detail now. And when I started painting this piece, or certainly when I started sketching it out, I was reminded of my heraldic art days and the importance of getting all the details right. Because Patty kept reminding me to make sure I got the hame strap done properly. And there were so many new names for me to learn, the different parts of a harness, and it is so complicated, but I knew I had to get it right. And that's one thing I learned when I was at art college and studying heraldry and calligraphy was, if you're going to paint, whether it's a figure or a horse or any kind of piece of equipment, that it has to work or be seen to be able to work. You can see in the next image the work. I've painted the harness, but I haven't painted the horse yet. So I did the most difficult part first, which was this harness with its myriad of buckles and chains and pieces of leather and straps. And as I said, the easy part was painting John Cundell. And I think when I painted that piece, that it was a tribute to Chip, because Chip had passed away Easter in 2021. And I just felt very inspired that I knew I had this large canvas and I hadn't begun it yet. And I realized that that canvas was waiting for a portrait of Chip. So that's what this became, Chip in harness. And you can see this is a completed work. And there's a little, the red and white barn in the background. So you can see the trim around the window in the background. And then there's Chip in the foreground with his elaborate harness and John Cundell leading him. And this is what the image that's used on the cover of the book. I'm including this work because this is something that I did 40 years ago. And this is from my calligraphy and heraldry days. I did this when I was at art college. I was inspired by the triumph of Maximilian I. And there were woodcuts by Hans Bergmeyer of these, the Triumph, called The Triumph of Maximilian. And in this piece, there's a Maximilian holding his coat of arms on a shield, and he's on a horse, and the horse is raising its front legs and hooves, and he's in very decorative costume, as is the horse, and there are plumes coming out of his head, and above you can see there's a decorative scroll, very, very decorative scroll, which was part of our training anyway, is learning to paint heraldry. This is the kind of thing we did. And I painted, I did the calligraphy on this scroll as well. And it's not a very large piece. This is because all of the work we were doing at that time was small. On top of the scroll, there's a skeleton pointing down at the calligraphy. And the calligraphy is an excerpt from Thomas Gray's Elegy. And I'm just going to read out what it actually says, because you might not be able to read it all out on your screen. And it says, "The boast of heraldry, the pomp of power, and all that beauty, all that wealth e'er gave, awaits alike the inevitable hour. The paths of glory lead but to the grave." And I think I realize now, when you can compare this with the kind of work I'm doing now, I realize now why I didn't stick with heraldry for too long, and I later turned to painting under-recognized people, behind the scenes workers, and telling their stories through my art. This is pulling onto York Street, where Johnny and Patty are sitting on the wagon. You just see the backs of them, the backs of the horses. And you can see the buildings, the towers, all rising up in the distance. And they have watched some changes. John Cundell was born at 113 York Street. So he has watched the whole area just grow up all around him. And that's what I wanted to try and illustrate, was with this series of paintings, was have the Cundell Stables, not just paintings of pretty horses or, you know, historic wagons. I wanted to make sure it was in the context of Lowertown and how that's changed, how Lowertown as kind of a metropolis nowadays. Here's a painting of little Colson exercising Janelle in the backyard. And this was before Patagonia came and built their construction, taking up the whole yard. They had the 6 horses back then, and they would exercise them on a lunge line. And usually it was Taylor Cundell, that's John's daughter, who was living with John and Patty. And Taylor and her partner Chris have 2 sons, Colson, who's 6, and little baby Cashton, who's 2. This is a painting, probably one of my favorites, and it's Edgar. And it's Edgar, he's raking the muck. And Edgar comes every 3 weeks to Cundell Stables, and he takes away the manure. And I watch this process. And to me, what I love most about it is the fact that Edgar takes the manure away to his large parcel of land outside Ottawa, and he spreads this on his land where he grows kale and turnips for the local deer to feed upon. So this is, as I say, to me, it's this lovely cycle of life. And again, it's someone who's a man at work, and you just don't often, I think that the people who are raking the muck in the literal sense don't often get recognized. So this is Edgar Huneau. And this is little Dixie, one of the 6 miniature horses. And Dixie is, I think, 36 inches high, and all of the little ones are shown at the fairs in the cart class. And this is the interior of the exhibition. And you can see one of the walls that Kathy hung. So these are the small horses, and these are 6 inches by 6 inches. So you won't get any sense from this talk on how big the work is. But for instance, this work is 10 inches by 10 inches. And it features all of the little horses poking their noses out with a kind of background that's very colorfully, almost like a circus or like a quilt, the way I've painted it all around them to give that joyful sense, because they are so, so joyful, those little horses. And here, looking down on this piece is looking down from our balcony. I could watch the hay delivery. And again, they bring in huge loads of hay. 400 bales are kept inside the barn. And it's a family affair. Everyone comes to help work. So that's what I wanted to make sure I had painted people at work unloading the hay in the context and in their yard, in the context of Lowertown, because you see all of the huge towers all around. And it's a country scene, and yet it's in the middle of the city. This is inside the exhibition. This is what you'll see. The exhibition is going to open on the 31st of January. So I hope that you'll get a chance to come and see it. I've included, as I say, a full harness. Patty and Johnny came and delivered the harness rack and set up this elaborate harness so that you really have a sense, and put down a 3 bales of hay so that you have a sense of what it's like. And here's a painting, another city scene with, I wanted to make sure I had a painting of the carriage, not just the wagon, but this is the carriage along York Street in the winter time. In the distance, you can see the Parliament buildings. And a work in progress again. And this one is I wanted to make sure that I got that sense of the Andaz Hotel, which really looms over Cundell Stables. And you can see what it looked like when it was finished. The first picture is just a sketch on the burnt sienna background. Well, the second, you can see the winter time and John Cundell with the wagon and the horses and the people waiting to board. But the Andaz Hotel is just looming, 17 stories looming over. And this is what some of the work looked like when it was, some of it was still in progress, and some of it was complete. And this is in my studio working in our apartment. Because of the pandemic, I chose to work at home. I still have a studio at the Rectory Art House on Murray Street, but I chose to work at home. And you can see in this next photograph, I have my easel set up in their yard, in the Cundell yard, and I'm painting a portrait of Patty, who's sitting in her yellow top for this portrait. And here's the portrait of Patty that I did, where it's just a head and shoulders of her. And again, this one is probably 20 inches by 20 inches, just so you get a sense of the size. And Patty, I always think Patty is, well, she's like a low-key power behind the throne at Kendall Stables. She's just very quiet. She's elegant, I think, like a swan. But like a swan, she's gliding around, looks effortless, but underneath, you know, that those feet are paddling like mad. And that's Patty. She never stops moving. And here's a portrait of John Cundell. And I think Kathy adequately described him at the beginning, but I did want to say about Johnny is that he really is larger than life. I'm just so glad that I've met Johnny and Patty. And Johnny, he has a quick wit. He is so generous, and he's got a real salt of the earth affability. He is an absolute expert on everything equine, and he's often called upon to judge at horse shows across Canada. And now I'm just going to come to the book. So this is a book launch. So we are getting to the book, and I'm just going to show you as we end this a few images from the book. And this is a cover of the book, and as I say, it's with a portrait of Chip on the front of it. It's a bilingual book, and it begins with Mark Aubin's family history in English, with lots of historic black and white photographs, the first third of the book. The middle third are reproductions of all of my paintings in color with bilingual descriptions. And then there's the French translation of the family history with more archival photographs in the following third. I am just going to read a passage from the book so that you have some sense of what the history is. And this is about Fred Cundell. That was Johnny's father, describing his early days at work with the horses. In the early 1930s, still in his teens, he took long summer journeys on the road to trade horses, traveling entirely by horse and sleeping in a tent. He referred to these adventures on the road as gypsying in the common parlance of the day. He traveled in an express, a wagon with a flat back and a seat in the front, driving a team of 8 to 10 horses tied behind the buckboard. The horses were all on the walk. No trucks were used. Fred covered part of eastern Ontario and into Quebec at Portage du Fort, heading for Shawville and many other towns, having made $700 by the time he got back. And what he's in quotes, I'd trade all summer and then I'd come back and it'd start to snow again, Fred said. He did this for 5 years before going to work at Standard Bread, breaking in horses. And these are some of the inside pictures of the book. And you can see on the left is a family tree of the Cundells, but that's a direct family tree right to William Cundell. And on the right is the Rideau Falls, an old picture of the Rideau Falls with old Ottawa in the background. And these are the black and white pages you can see on the left, and this next page spread is William Cundell with one of his Dalmatians, which they were famous for. And in the next spread, you can see on the right-hand side, there's an old photograph of Fred Cundell with Prince, a hackney pony. And this is an example what the middle part of the book is that's in color with my works. And here are pictures of the painting I described to you before, a stable friendship of Big John grooming Chip in the stable with the little ones looking on. And another page spread with past meets present, pulling out onto York Street, those two city pictures. And in the next image, you can see I did a portrait of Taylor Cundell, who has an elaborate tattoo, sleeve of tattoos on her left arm, all with an equine theme. And she's washing a little miniature horse queen. And there's a painting on the left-hand page with Patty, and she's painting the hooves of Jake as Chip looks on from his stall in the distance. And a city picture with the wagon, John and the wagon and the horses and the looming buildings. And then there's a picture of the same wagon with the Governor General's forest in behind, because they go up there every winterlude to do wagon rides. And this is the end of the colored part of my work. And you can see the back end of Chip in a painting. And then this is the French section of the book. And again, they're more beautiful historic photographs that Mark Aubin sourced, with horses pulling wagons or pulling a streetcar in one case. And this is the back cover of the book. In ending this, I just want to say, and you'll probably get a sense of this, is that the Cundells are indomitable. They have weathered challenges over the generations, and the present day is no exception. Their son Sean died in a road accident in Thailand in 2019. A pandemic shut down their wagon carriage ride business. John's brother, who's his best friend as well, Fred, passed away in 2021. Chip, Belgian draft horse, he passed away at Easter 2021. They experienced the loss of the shared yard due to the construction of the Patagonia shop. So they've had a really difficult time, but the Cundells are, as I say, indomitable. They found a way to work within a limited space. The wagon and carriage rides are being booked again. There are 2 Belgians in the stable now to be friends with Jake. Jake is still there, but also Flash and Robbie came from Navan, and the harness business is picked up. So when it comes to the exhibition, I asked Johnny and Patty if they could come with the wagon to help deliver my works, because I had some of the larger works at my studio on Murray Street, and they came with the wagon to collect these. And Ian and his friend Charles did all the heavy lifting. And then you can see what it looked like in front of the art school, removing them from the wagon to deliver them so that Kathy could do the installation at the gallery in the art school. In closing, I just want to say that it is my privilege to know the Cundell family and stable hand John O'Hara, as well as all of the horses. And it's an honor that they've allowed me to share in their world. Cundell Stables really is a living legacy of Lowertown's past and a jewel in Ottawa's crown. And you're invited to attend the exhibition at the Ottawa School of Art, and it should be reopening on January 31st. And the book will be available in the boutique at the art school. So thanks very much for attending this virtual launch.
Okay, so, and with that, Karen, thank you. Thank you for everything that you've shared with us this evening. You tell beautiful and captivating stories with your paintings, and we are all richer for it. So thank you. Again, I'll remind our audience that the OSA is scheduled to open to the public as of January 31st, and our regular gallery hours are Monday to Thursday, 9 a.m. to 9 p.m., Friday and Saturday, 9 a.m. to 4 p.m., and Sunday from 12:30 p.m. to 4 p.m. But please do check the website, our website at www.artottawa.ca for updates as the situation with Omicron remains fluid. The book, The Last Stable in Lowertown, Cundell Stables, Ottawa by Karen Bailey and Mark Oban is $35. And as we've discussed, will be available for purchase at the Ottawa School of Art reception as of January 31st. The in-person exhibition located at the Ottawa School of Art's main gallery at 35 George Street will run until February 27th, and COVID protocols remain in place. So this concludes our evening. Thank you again for joining us, and we wish you all a good night. Thank you.